The morning sunlight spilled across my apartment, hitting the cream-colored walls just right, highlighting the small gallery of framed cityscape photos I'd collected over the years. I sipped my coffee, the warmth seeping through my fingers, and ran my hand over the smooth silk of my blouse. Everything looked perfect, my carefully curated world, calm and controlled, but my phone buzzed insistently, dragging me back to a life I thought I'd left behind. Court notice, the subject line read. My heart skipped, then slowed. I knew exactly who it was from before I even opened it, my parents. I pressed the screen, letting the words swim in front of me. They wanted to sue me for buying a house that I had worked for, dreamed of, and poured every late night into making mine. Their argument? It belonged to my sister, the one who hadn't held a full-time job in years, the one who spent more time scrolling social media than paying bills. I sank back into my leather chair, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Pride mixed with disbelief, hurt with a strange thread of humor. They couldn't see me, not really. They still saw the little girl they wanted to control, the one who had to obey the rules they set. I rubbed my temple and looked out the window at the skyline, the city alive beneath me, the hum of traffic like a distant symphony. I'd survived worse. I'd worked for every inch of this life. And if they thought this notice would scare me, well, they were in for a surprise. I remember the day I first realized my family didn't see me as my own person. I was 24, fresh out of college, clutching a folder with my first ever job offer from a marketing firm downtown. Excitement bubbled inside me, but as I stepped into my parents' living room, it deflated instantly. "Why are you wasting your time with that?" my father sneered, tossing the folder onto the couch. "You should focus on helping your sister. She needs a home. She needs support. You're so selfish." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him correctly. My sister, Emma, was 28, had quit her last job without notice, and somehow managed to spend her days in a haze of entitlement. I had always been the responsible one, the golden child, they liked to say, yet here I was, scolded for taking my first step toward independence. My hands trembled as I picked up the folder. My chest ached, a lump lodged in my throat. "Dad, I earned this," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I worked for this. I didn't take anything from anyone." My mother shook her head, her eyes sharp, unyielding. "Family comes first, Sarah. You should know better." I felt it then, a sting that would linger for years. The knowledge that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally didn't actually see me. I wanted to scream, to argue, but all I could do was retreat to my bedroom, letting the door slam softly behind me. It was in that quiet space that my grandmother's words came to mind. She had always been my secret ally, the one who whispered truths the rest of the family ignored. "Sarah," she said once, pressing a small gold locket into my hand, "you have to build your own life. Nobody can do it for you. Not them, not even me. But you can do it." I clutched that locket as if it were a lifeline. That night, I made a choice. I would find my own way. I would work, save, and grow, even if it meant walking away from the people who should have been my biggest supporters. I didn't yet know how, but I knew the path was mine and mine alone. That was the moment my independence was born, not in rebellion, exactly, but in the quiet, fierce certainty that I deserved a life that was entirely my own. After that night with my grandmother's locket clutched in my hand, I threw myself into building a life that was mine, every ounce of energy focused on proving to myself that I could succeed on my own terms. My first apartment was tiny, barely more than a studio in the older part of the city, with peeling paint and a stubborn leak in the bathroom. But it was mine. I painted the walls a soft cream, laid down a rug I could afford on my first paycheck, and let the little lights I hung around the window frame fill the space with warmth. I worked long hours at the marketing firm, often staying late to refine campaigns, learn analytics, and memorize every detail about our clients. My mentor, an older woman named Margaret, noticed my dedication. She had started from the bottom herself and saw something familiar in me, a drive that refused to be ignored. "Sarah," she said one evening as we closed up the office, "you have talent. Don't let anyone, not even your family, Define what you're worth. Margaret's words became my anthem. I took freelance projects on the side. Each small win, a successful campaign, a glowing client email, building both my confidence and my bank account. I faced days when self-doubt gnawed at me, when it seemed easier to surrender to exhaustion and the quiet voice that whispered maybe my family was right. But every time I looked at that locket around my neck, I reminded myself that I was building something lasting. Over the years, my side ventures grew. I found a niche consulting small businesses on social media strategy, and before I knew it, I had clients I'd never dared to dream of. Boutique brands, local startups, even a regional chain that asked me to oversee their launch campaign. I kept the success quiet, posting modest updates on social media that hinted at my achievements without revealing the full picture. My parents never knew the full scope of my life. They assumed I was still scraping by, living modestly, obediently, the girl who had to bend to family whims. Meanwhile, I invested wisely, learning everything I could about property, finance, and growth. I saved relentlessly, sacrificing luxury for security, for freedom, for the moment when I could finally stand without needing anyone's approval. I never bragged, never boasted. I simply kept moving forward, letting results speak quietly, powerfully for me. The house came next. A beautiful brownstone in a quiet neighborhood, sunlight spilling through tall windows, a little garden in the back where I could finally plant flowers and breathe. The day I signed the papers, I felt a wave of triumph, so intoxicating I almost cried. Not because of the house itself, but because it was proof. Proof that I could build, protect, and claim a life that was entirely my own, even when the people who should have supported me tried to take it away. And yet, I kept it secret. My parents assumed I was still living modestly. My sister, Emma, had no idea I had taken control of my future. For now, the truth remained mine, a quiet, unshakable victory waiting for the right moment to surface. The knock at my door was sharp, unexpected, and oddly ceremonial. I glanced at the clock, early evening, and then at the freshly brewed tea cooling on the counter. The envelope I'd seen sitting on the kitchen table that morning wasn't a mistake. My parents were here, and with them, inevitably, Emma. I opened the door, smiling in a way that seemed effortless, though my heart beat faster than I would have liked. "Hi," I said, letting the calm in my voice do the work my nerves couldn't. My father's jaw tightened as he took in the apartment. He probably expected the cramped studio I had when I was 24. Instead, he stepped into a space that smelled of polished wood, fresh linen, and the faint hint of lavender from the candles I always kept burning. Art lined the walls, prints from local artists, bold, abstract pieces that reflected my personality and taste. My furniture was sleek, comfortable, tasteful. Every detail whispered, quietly but unmistakably, I had made it. Emma's eyes flicked around nervously. "Sarah, this place?" Her voice wavered, the certainty she carried when she assumed entitlement fading. I gestured toward the living room, where a small bouquet of white lilies sat on the coffee table. "Sit down," I said smoothly. "I think we have some things to talk about." They looked at me, waited for me to stumble, to flinch, to apologize for daring to live my life. But I didn't. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, and now it felt like the universe had finally set the stage. I let the silence stretch, letting them absorb the surroundings before I spoke again. "I know why you're here," I said finally, letting each word land. "It's about the house." My father swallowed, his face unreadable. Emma shifted in her seat, nervously twisting a strand of hair around her finger. "The house is mine," I continued. "I bought it with my own money. Every dollar comes from my work, my decisions, my risks. Not yours. Not anyone else's. And no, it isn't going to be handed over because someone thinks they deserve it more than I do." Their eyes widened. I could see disbelief, shame, guilt, and, against all odds, amazement flicker across their faces. I walked over to the mantel and picked up the small gold locket my grandmother had given me years ago. I held it out so they could see it. "This was given to me with one piece of advice. Build your own life, Sarah. Nobody else can do it for you." I did. I am doing it. And this house is proof. My mother's hands trembled. We didn't know, she whispered. No, I said, softer now but firm. You didn't. And maybe that's because you never looked. Because you didn't believe I could. Emma's face fell. But I thought. You thought you'd get it because of who you are, I said, gently but unmistakably. But life doesn't work like that. Work, dedication, and courage do. And that's what earned me this home. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sounds were the faint hum of the city outside and the ticking of the vintage clock on the wall. Then my father finally muttered, almost to himself, "We underestimated you." I smiled. Not a smile of revenge, but of quiet, undeniable victory. I had waited years for this moment, not to punish, but to reveal the truth I had worked so hard to build. And now, there it was, undeniable, unshakable, mine. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the moment settle. The room was silent, except for the quiet breathing of my parents and Emma. For the first time in years, the balance had shifted. I wasn't just the obedient daughter anymore. I was the woman who had built a life on her own terms, and now I had the power to decide how or if my family would fit into it. "I'm willing to help," I said finally, letting my voice carry calm authority. "But on my terms. There are conditions." My father's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across his face. My mother looked tense, almost afraid. Emma's fingers twisted nervously in her lap.
I knew the rules had changed.
"First," I began, "Emma needs to contribute. No more waiting for things to fall into her lap. She needs to find a job, any job, and maintain it for at least 6 months before we even consider discussing assistance." I paused, letting the words sink in. Emma's face paled, but I continued. "Second, Mom and Dad, I expect respect for my choices. No more unsolicited advice about my finances, my home, or my career. If you want to be in my life, you must accept me as I am, strong, independent, and capable." I reached for the gold locket on the mantel, holding it in my hand as I looked each of them in the eyes. This locket represents more than a family heirloom. It represents independence, perseverance, and self-respect. I want you to carry that lesson, too. I saw my father's jaw tighten. He was struggling against years of old habits, the reflex to control and command. I wasn't a child anymore. I could feel the shift in the room, a subtle acknowledgement that the power dynamics had changed forever. "Finally," I said, "we need boundaries. Visits, conversations, and family interactions will be on terms that respect everyone's space and dignity. Toxic behavior, manipulation, or entitlement will not be tolerated. I've worked too hard, and I will not compromise my peace for anyone." Emma's voice broke slightly. I understand. I didn't soften. I didn't need to. She needed this clarity to grow, just as I had. They all sat quietly, absorbing my conditions. It wasn't easy, and I could see the initial resistance flicker in their expressions. But I could also see the tiny spark of realization, maybe even hope, that things could be different if they were willing to change. For the first time, I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I wasn't begging for recognition. I was setting the rules for inclusion in my life, and they were clear: respect, growth, responsibility. Anything less would mean exclusion. As I put the locket back on the mantel, I felt a wave of relief, mingled with pride. I had stood my ground. I had claimed my life. And now, if they wanted a place in it, they had to rise to meet the standards I had set, not the ones they had tried to impose on me. This was the new chapter, one in which I no longer gave power away. One in which I had finally earned the respect and space I had always deserved. Weeks passed, and the tension in the house slowly began to thaw. Emma found a job at a local boutique marketing firm. She called me one evening, voice hesitant but proud. "Sarah, I think I can actually do this. I want to try." I smiled, letting relief and pride wash over me. "I knew you could," I said softly. "It just takes starting somewhere." Mom and Dad began to change too, though more subtly. They asked questions about my work, about my house, about the clients I helped. The tone was different now, not judgmental, but curious, cautious, and respectful. I could see them trying, learning how to interact without slipping into old patterns. One quiet evening, I sat in the living room, the gold locket resting in my palm. I traced the delicate engraving, feeling the connection to my grandmother, to her faith in me, and to the journey that had brought me here. It had been a long, winding road, filled with hurt, doubt, and challenges that at times seemed insurmountable. Yet every moment had shaped me, hardened me in ways that were gentle and firm all at once. I thought back to the first time I had stepped out on my own, the tiny apartment, the late nights of work and worry. I thought about the house I now owned, the clients who trusted me, and the life I had fought tooth and nail to create. I realized that success wasn't just about money or property. It was about respect, autonomy, and the freedom to live authentically. The locket gleamed softly in the lamplight. I held it up to the window for a moment, feeling my grandmother's presence, her encouragement, her wisdom. It had been my anchor through every storm, a reminder that my life belonged to me and me alone. I smiled to myself, a quiet, self-assured smile, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and how far you've come. I had navigated betrayal, fought for independence, and emerged stronger than I had ever imagined. And as I set the locket back on the mantel, I whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the universe, to my past, and to my own reflection, I am enough. I am strong. I am free. In that moment, I knew it was true. My life, my choices, my house, and my happiness were mine. And no one, not even the people who had tried to take it, could ever take that away.